We all go through periods of life where we feel like we want to be doing more, either more work, more studying, more reading, or more exercising. And there are dozens of approaches that you can take to personal productivity: GTD, Para, Ezekiel bullet journals, to do lists. I've tried them all. And the truth is, once you've tried enough of these systems, what you come to realize is that these systems are often a distraction from the real work that you want to be doing. They're either too rigid, too flexible, or too time consuming. And in a constant search to find this sort of Goldilocks zone where you have the perfect system and the work just comes naturally, you end up spending more time setting up and tearing down these systems than you do doing any real work. And if that's you, then I want to share with you what I've come to learn about personal productivity over years of failures and mistakes so that you can avoid the same traps that most people fall into. And though in the second half of this video, I'm going to share some of the specific practices I do, I'm going to try and focus on principles because each person's goals are unique and so each system needs to be unique. My name's Harry Smith and this is Pages to Practice, where I'm trying to boil down learning and modern wisdom from the great books of the world. And today we're looking at how to build your own distraction-free operating system for life. Look, let's start by determining what exactly it is that we're trying to build. In the most general sense, we're looking for a system that gets out of the way and lets us get on with our work. And not just any work, but the right work at the right time with the right people in the right way. And it would be a bonus if that work was enjoyable. I'm going to explore the broad themes and principles behind distraction-free productivity. And I'm going to talk more about why any system needs to be personal to you. But for now, it's suffice to say that the generalities really are more important than anybody's one specific practice. I'm going to examine why you need many less tools than you think, why I don't use social media and I don't think you should either, what phones and computers are good for and how and when to use them, and the idea that I think you should develop mini systems for your work rather than large overarching macro systems. With those principles in hand, I'm going to talk about some of the specifics of the work that I do. I'm going to talk about how I use commonplacing, how I use a work log to track mini projects and develop and experiment with ideas, what my process is for capturing ideas and thoughts throughout the day, and ultimately how I do track tasks and make sure that what needs to happen happens. And just to conclude our discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about custom software and how AI tools are going to allow more people to build tools specific to their use case. I'm not going to give a full treatment of that idea. I'd love to make a video about that one day. I just want to comment on why and where personal productivity might be going in the future. Now, I generally find that I get a lot more done the less I use my phone and the less I use my computer, which is kind of a strange thing to say in 2025. However, once you realize that most of the greatest minds and thinkers throughout history never had any of this stuff. I mean, I have a whole bookshelf of books written by people before the 1950s, some of the most important books in the world. I'm reading The Making of the Atomic Bomb at the moment, and one thing that stands out to me is that every scientist that's involved in this still is 100% dedicated to their work. They work long hours through the night. They're very excited by their work. They don't stop to eat. They just plow on. It's very admirable in a way. And they don't have phones and they don't have computers. And I think that's part of it. In fact, the only tools for thought they had were pen and paper, chalk and blackboard. So if you think you can't live without these modern technological conveniences, consider that people did and have done for way more time than we've had them, which should lead you to question whether it's an absolute truth that we need them. And if you think that maths or science or technology or any sort of academic subject has been defined in its complexity only by the advent of technology, then I'm going to link in the description below to a video by 3Blue1Brown called The Cosmic Distance Ladder, which explains, along with Terence Tao, how we came to figure out how far apart everything is in the universe. And it's amazingly complex, these ideas, and they were done hundreds of years ago. And you'll also note that if you watch any video of a famous mathematician working, they still use blackboards, and there's a reason for that. If you go and watch your average productivity content or you go and read a productivity book, you'll notice a common theme emerging, which is most people talking about this are talking about how they get their work done to tell you about how to get your work done. And there's a sort of circular marketers selling marketing thing going on. And I think the reason for that is because if you go looking for a productivity system, You have to invent work for the system. And this is the wrong way to go around. What you should do is let the actions lead to the tools rather than the tools lead to the actions. You should just work without system until that work becomes overwhelming or complex, and then you should introduce the minimum amount of system that you need. What people do is they go looking for a system to help them get started when they actually have no idea what they want to do. And what you want to do is a much more difficult problem than how you should go about it. So there's no point building a system up unless you've answered that question. Now, I'm not going to answer that question in this video, but just know that there is no productivity system that can fix your lack of interest. So to sum up, what I'm advocating for is to let your actions lead to the tool. A carpenter makes a table with a saw because a saw is the right tool for the job. He doesn't take the saw to the kitchen and use it to cut up onions. I think one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is trying to make one overarching macro system that does everything and synthesizes and combines all the different parts of your life. This isn't feasible for a number of reasons. The main one being that the separate activities in your life are too distinct and too different to be combined in this way. When you try to bring everything under one umbrella, there are so many corner cases and specifics that you build a system that is full of complexity and grows and accumulates cruft over time. And like any system, you will eventually have to restart this system. If you've ever tried GTD or Power or any one of these really common productivity systems, you'll know that 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years later, you have to declare a sort of system bankruptcy and throw it out and start again. And a mini system is an approach that tackles both of these problems. When you make a mini system, you're making a productivity system or a school of thought or a way of doing things that's just specific to that goal or that project. And because it's so specific, you 100% design it so it's the most effective way of going about that particular activity. You don't have to try and adapt it to some other framework. Learning guitar is nothing like learning maths, is nothing like trying to do the chores around your house. And even your mini systems will have to be restarted and rebooted as they grow in complexity or they just need changing up. At a very base level, if you're improving, what gets you through beginner stages won't get you through the expert stages. The nature of the activity changes, so the system has to change with it. And because this is inevitable on any long-term project, if your systems work, they'll have to be rebooted. You'll have to tear them down and rebuild them. And if you let your systems be small, this is very easy to do. If you have this huge system that your whole life is encapsulated in, it becomes much more difficult. Think of it like building workshops for that particular activity. If you go into a carpenter's workshop, everything in that workshop is for building furniture. You can't cook in there. You can't do maths in there. I mean, you could literally, but it wouldn't maybe be the most effective space. Build little workshops for activities. Have setups where you go to a place and it's perfect for that activity, and then go to another place that's perfect for that activity, and you'll get a lot more done, and you'll get a lot less distracted. Now, as I said in the intro, I want to advocate for the idea that you should get rid of social media, which seems a little ironic because I have a YouTube and a Substack, which of course are social medias, but my interaction with them is very limited. While it's not immediately apparent maybe what social media has to do with productivity, social media has a huge effect on how you feel. Social media, it's a little bit like alcohol. It's hard to tell the negative effect it's having on everyone because it's so pervasive amongst everybody. And just like drinking, if you say to someone, social media is bad, they're likely to go, yes, yeah, no, you're right, yeah, it's terrible, and then return to doom scrolling almost immediately. And the reason why I mention it in the context of this video is because social media is the ultimate distraction. You are a social being. You want to be with other people and do what other people do. And your emotional state is deeply affected by the things people say and the things people do as well. The incentive on social media is to present a false life which gets the maximum amount of reaction from other social beings, which means that the odds are very much stacked towards lying about one's life. If you're trying to do anything hard, if you're trying to change yourself, improve yourself, start a business, build anything, doing hard things isn't what most people are doing. Most people are doing nothing. And if you surround yourself by media of what everybody else is doing, it's going to be that much harder to zag while everybody else is zigging. It's been 2 years since I deleted every social media account I had, and I've never looked back. You can't look at an Instagram post if you haven't got an Instagram account. I do really think that social media is a mind poison that attacks the very foundation of your mental health and your well-being, and you can't build anything on a crumbling foundation. If you want to do important, hard and difficult projects, then social media is a huge impediment to having the mind and the body that will let you. This is a calculator. All you can do on a calculator is maths. This is my Remarkable Pro. All you can do on it is write, either with the pen or with the keyboard. In the cupboard, I've got a Steam Deck. I don't use it very often, but all you can do on a Steam Deck is play video games. The thing that links all these devices is that they've got one clearly defined purpose. Your actions are defined by the objects that you interact with. And when you use a single purpose item, you can only use it for that one purpose. Items like our phones and our computers have bundled together hundreds of activities. They're the complete opposite of calculators and my Remarkable. They're these multi-purpose devices. And we've been sold on the idea that computers and phones are useful because of this. And there's no doubt that computers and phones are useful. My phone is a useful device. It allows me to communicate. I can send emails on the go. I can look at my finances. I can do all these sort of useful things. With that power comes a real double-edged sword. I can do all sorts of other things on my phone. Distraction is only one click away if I let it. And there's a constant barrage of notifications to drag your attention away if you're somehow resisting for a moment. And your computer is no better in this regard. In fact, your computer's probably worse because there are so many ways to get distracted with it. I find myself doing all of my work now as much as I can on my Remarkable. I can only write and type and I can read on there, which is most of what I do when I study and I read classics. And in fact, I think you'll find that huge amounts of work and important projects can be done using pen and paper or a Remarkable. People did this stuff for a long time. Almost any hobby, you can buy actual physical books, and then you can engage with something that is single purpose, distraction free. We know that phones and computers are useful, and maybe we agree that we can do some of our work without them, but it's obvious that we can't do all of their work. I have both a phone and a computer, and I do use them often. So how do I go about using them to remain distraction free and be productive? And the principle here is to use them intentionally. You should treat your laptop and your phone and your iPad or whatever as the dangerous devices that they are. While I'm a big advocate for pen and paper thinking, there are certain things and activities and tools that either you can only do on a computer or a phone, or are much better on a computer and a phone. And I make a deliberate and intentional choice to use the tool for that purpose. My to-do list is digital, it's on my laptop, because my to-do list ends up becoming quite complex, and it would be unfeasible to manage it on paper. I think this is really important, maybe less so for computers, but especially for people's phones. They've taken grip of our behavior and our attentions and our energies in a really sad and dangerous way. So rather than just talk about this in the abstract, let me tell you some specific ways that you can make it harder to waste time on these devices. My mobile phone has been in silent mode for years, and it only comes out of silent mode when I'm physically at my day job. People are paying to get hold of me, so I let them. But apart from that, I only let people get hold of me when I choose to look at my phone. I have 0 notifications on any app. If I want to check my emails, then I just open them. I don't need to know immediately that I've got an email. And if that's terrifying to you, people quickly get used to the idea that they're not going to be able to get an immediate answer from you. I don't know about Android phones, but on iPhones you can set a grayscale filter, which I set to about 80 or 90%, which lets me see just enough colour so that I can review information that I'm sent that has colour that I need to recognise without having to go in and turn it off and on all the time. The grayscale filter makes your phone much more boring, and I find myself wanting to use it less because of it. A lot of the time, I try not to carry my phone. I'm at home, I don't have it in my pocket, I leave it in another room, not like an intentional choice, but out of habit now. If I go out to the shops and I don't need a phone, I just take my wallet instead. Maybe I'll go to the park. I don't need this device tethered to my soul all of the time. When I open my phone, there are no app shortcuts on the home screen. To get an app, I have to go and search for it, which means I need to know what I want to open, which means I can question what I think I'm going to open. And the last thing is, Just don't kid yourself that you're doing that much useful work on your phone. You can do reviews and maybe send a few emails. But the truth is, if you want to do real work, you're going to need a desk and a place to do it. And on my laptop, I apply some similar principles. I turn off as many notifications as I can. I use applications in full screen mode with minimal user interfaces. This isn't just an aesthetic thing, but the less visual clutter and the less visual distraction, the more you can focus on what you're meant to be doing. I use a good tiling window manager. If you're not familiar with that concept, it just lets me use shortcut keys to switch between things that I'm doing. Being able to go directly to the thing that I'm looking for means I can't see anything else on the way. And it's this journey between tasks that we often get distracted. And if I don't need the internet, I just turn the internet off. And it's a subtle thing, but sometimes I open the web browser just to rest or relax or looking for a distraction. And if the internet's off, then it reminds me that I shouldn't be doing that. When I use these tools, both my computer and my phone, I know exactly what it is I'm trying to do. And I'll talk about that later when I talk about task tracking. Now, you can't work all the time. At least that's what everybody says. And I do think it's important to be able to relax. But I think we've lost a little bit of a relationship with why work can actually be meaningful. And that's no surprise in a world where most people's jobs are pretty awful and also meaningless. But the things that you engage with personally, that you want to be productive with, there's no reason you can't approach them in a joyful and playful way. And you can use them as your relaxation time. There's nothing to say that relaxation needs to involve an hour of television or a video game or a movie. And these are all recent ideas. And in fact, one of the best ways to relax is a book. And the reason why it's important to think about how you relax is because something called your dopamine system. Now, I'm not going to give a full explanation of this system, and I'll link down below to some talks by Andrew Huberman that does a much better job of it than me. Dopamine is a very important part of how you motivate yourself to actually do something. And high stimulus activities like video games and movies and television and porn and all of these sorts of things, they drain you of dopamine, and that makes it really hard to just stay productive and stay motivated. There is a place for high dopamine activities, and you don't have to live like a monk. Personally, I have an extremely addictive personality, and I find myself doing almost anything with a minor addictive element to complete distraction. So I don't watch a lot of TV, and I don't watch movies, and I don't play a lot of video games anymore. But if you're going to, don't do it before bed, and don't do it in the middle of the working day. Wait till the work is finished, and then engage with it for a limited period of time. One of the best ways to stay consistent is just don't do more today than you can recover from tomorrow. You want to be able to do work every day in a way that you enjoy and feel relaxed and stimulated. So I want to talk about some of the specific work practices I use that I find keep me distraction free and making progress. And I want to talk about something that gets a lot of airtime nowadays, which is called commonplacing. Now, I'm offering commonplacing as the pen and paper alternative to sort of second brains or personal knowledge databases, which I think on a large part become a distraction from actual work. And as commonplace books have become more popular, they've become more complicated as people have tried to build systems to tell you about so that they can sound clever and smart. And the idea behind commonplacing is actually very simple. It's just a process of collecting quotes from things that you read and gathering them in a common place. So, for example, if you were studying philosophy, you might have a journal titled Philosophy, and then you might write interesting quotes while you read philosophy or read about philosophy in the commonplace book. And you don't have to deliberately go out and collect the quotes. There's a spontaneous nature to it. Just as something strikes you, you write it in the commonplace book. And then you can go back through it and you can look and you can explore and you can see that sometimes you'll go in one direction, other times another direction. And it's just a way of collecting and developing the thoughts that you have about what you read. And you can also start subcategories. Maybe you're interested in a particular area of philosophy, so you start a justice one. And you can pretty much start a commonplace book about any topic that you like. And that's it. I mean, it's that simple. It's a very effective tool. It's one that I've been exploring a lot recently. It's the one that I use to make these videos and also do all sorts of other learning and projects just on pen and paper. Now, something that I've been doing recently, which I've been really enjoying, is what I call a work log, or it's kind of like a laboratory report book. And what I do is lots of times I have ideas and I don't know whether I really want to commit to them. And so I experiment. I spend a couple of hours just playing around with it. And instead of losing that work, I keep them in a notebook. I have an index at the start which tells me which page to go to for which idea. Then I write down things that I learn, questions, places to go next, different directions to take it. And it's a really cool technique because that time isn't wasted. It puts you in this experimental, playful mode. And that's, I think, really the ideal place to sit with anything you're pursuing for your own merit and your own gain. If you go and look anything about sort of note taking or productivity, there'll be a lot of talk about what to do about fleeting thoughts and ideas. These are the things that occur to you while you're doing something else. You want to capture because you want to look at it later. Now, I don't think you need to capture everything. I don't necessarily carry a notebook in my pocket like some people do, and I know people find this useful, but I think that there's this illusion that if you capture everything, suddenly you'll have amazing ideas. The best way to have good ideas is just to be engaged and creative and curious and just let them come as they come. But I do maintain a list of ideas that I have, and occasionally I'll maintain a sort of specific list for a group or catalogue of similar ideas. For example, I have a list on my Remarkable for titles of books. Not that I necessarily am going to write the books, just because I think that interesting ideas for titles give you directions of research or things to learn. And I sort of separate this out from quick notes or fleeting thoughts, which to-do items and appointments and deliveries and all of these sort of things that you write down in a rush. And I mainly just throw these away. I don't think they're that useful to keep around. For every project, I keep an ideas list. When you're working on a project, it's likely that you have lots of different ideas about things that you could do in that project and different ways that it could go. And they mostly occur when you're doing something with the project. And during that work period, they are actually a distraction. And so writing them down is just a really easy way to get yourself out of those little thought loops that you can have. You keep thinking about an idea to do something rather than doing the thing that you're currently doing. Task tracking becomes the focus of almost every productivity system, and I think this is misplaced. You should implement the minimum amount of task tracking that you need to know what you need to do next. And that's vague because it's inherently related to who you are and what you're doing. If you're the CEO of some major company, you're going to need some big system because you have lots of open threads. But it's likely that you've just got one or two, and so maybe just a very simple to-do list is all that you need. For me, I really only need to know three things. What I should do next, what has to be done today, and what has to be done this week. And that gives me all the context I need to decide what to do today. Obviously, I have things that I have to do, mainly relating to work. And of the things that I want to do, I make sure I always know what next by creating, in my to-do software, I create a project and I split the project down into day-by-day tasks. And these generally a unit of work about an hour or two that I can do. And so when I find an hour or two, I can just take that chunk and then the next chunk and the next chunk and the next chunk. And obviously it's not possible to chunk out every project in advance. If you're working for a textbook, it's very easy. If you're working on a software or something, that's very hard. But as long as you've got the next 3 or 4 days planned, that's generally enough. The important thing about my to-do list system is that I embody the idea of microsystems. So a to-do list for studying a textbook is a completely different thing to a to-do list for learning guitar or painting a picture. Your to-do list and your time tracking and your task tracking, they all have to be specific to that project. So don't feel the need to create one ultimate system here either. I wanted to finish this discussion by talking a little bit about where I think personal productivity and distraction-free operating is going in the future. And this is the potential unlocked by AI coding assistants. Now, I've been a computer programmer as a hobby for a long time, and I feel as if I'm a confident developer. And because of that, I've developed lots of tools on my computer to help me do more work. I use a custom reading list, I have terminal scripts and text scripts, I have programs and user interfaces that help me at work. The problem always is, even for an experienced developer, is the time investment. And coding assistants, A, lower the skill entry to building your own tool, but also they rapidly reduce the amount of time that it takes, because most tools are simple enough that these assistants excel at them. This is a really exciting area for the future. People have always imagined that your computing device would be this tool that you were able to use very specifically to your work, that people would be able to build their own software. And it's a dream that's never quite come together because of the complexity of building software. But it's my hope that in the future these tools might develop to the point where this is possible for everybody. Now, I want to thank you very much for listening. I don't like to dwell on productivity topics too much, but I wanted to say a few things about what I've learned over the last 10 years in terms of staying distraction free. And if you enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments below. And if you find real value out of any of these productivity systems, then why don't you let me know how you use them and how long you've been using them? Because I'd be interested to have a conversation with you about that. And if you're into reading classics, literature, self-study, or a whole bunch of different topics, then you might like my writing, which you can find on Substack, which I'll put in the description below. I want to thank you very much for listening. My name is Harry Smith, and this is Pages to Practice.